He's the only guy who, who's human trafficked all these people to nobody. What is going on there? And the government won't talk about it. His partner is in prison and convicted of trafficking to nobody.
My exploitation started at the age of 4. I got to sit on his lap. I got to drive the train. We tend to think of trafficking as some out there, over there, third world country. The vast majority, like myself, are originally trafficked by a family member. Besides his perverse love for little girls, my grandfather loved old gospel music. He was a leader in his church. He put in a cassette tape playing How Great Thou Art. A tangible part of the memory is Jesus being in the backseat of the car holding me. In second grade, I sat in a church on Sunday morning behind the man who paid to rape me the night before. I would credit my resilience and my strength to a force much greater than myself.
I think that's the absolute worst trauma somebody can experience is what you went through.
There absolutely is hope. There is another side. There is light in the darkness.
All right, welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Before we begin, I want to share a trigger warning for this episode. Today's conversation touches on topics related to human trafficking, trauma, and abuse. If you are a survivor or find these subjects difficult, please listen with care. Your well-being is most important to me. Jennisue is a survivor of human trafficking, and she's the founder and CEO of Compass 31. Jennisue, welcome to Tim Teaches. Before we begin diving into your story, you're the founder and CEO of Compass 31, and if you could kind of get into that a little bit, and then we'll backtrack into your story.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to spend some time with you and your audience. So my name is Jennisue, and I am founder and CEO of Compass 31, which is an international counter-trafficking organization. We exist to fight human trafficking through prevention, restoration, and leadership development. Prevention is a piece that I'm really excited about. We were able to create a tool called Priceless Cube that is a human trafficking prevention curriculum being used globally right now. My husband and I have had the privilege of training national leaders in 44 nations that are using it in high-risk regions in their communities. And so that's the prevention piece of what we do. The restoration piece involves restoration programs that are currently operating in 5 countries. Oh. And we are currently serving 44 individuals that have experienced exploitation and come out. Our youngest program participants right now are 4 years old, and our oldest right now is 32. And that leads to one of the pieces of our program, leadership development, that I'm most excited about because it makes the work of Compass 31 really distinct in the counter-trafficking world. So our leadership development piece is our commitment to walk alongside of our survivors, our program participants, in a holistic program to the highest level of education that they desire. And so we've had one of our participants graduate law school and pass her bar exam. We have 2 that have graduated with master's degrees in social work. We have 2 more master's degree candidates getting ready to graduate in May. We have somebody with a business degree, another 2 in university right now. We have several that have graduated from Bible school. So it is our goal and intention to equip and empower these individuals to be whatever they were meant to be before the trauma happened. And so those are the 3 areas that we work. We're not the ones that kick down doors and drag people out. We walk alongside people while they're still in exploitation, and as they find freedom, integrate them into a restoration program and then equip them to re-enter into their cultures and communities as agents of change.
Man, I mean, working alongside people who are currently going through that, don't you just want to yank them out of there and say, come on, this is, what keeps them there?
Well, that is a fabulous question. And I don't know that I've been asked that on a podcast. There is a wide variety of reasons why individuals stay in exploitation. The vast majority have a history of sexual violence in childhood where it became coded in their brain that this is what I'm built for. And learning how to stay safe or navigate this environment is how I stay alive. Most of those of the individuals were originally trafficked or exploited or violated by a family member. And so if this person who loves me did this to me, then why am I going to trust Jennisue or why am I going to trust Tim to do anything that would be better or safer? And then there's an element of trauma bonding where there's a whole attachment cycle, a chemical neurological bond that happens when a person is in distress and then is met with some sort of comfort. In this case, often distress caused by the perpetrator and then comfort brought by the perpetrator. The individual bonds with that perpetrator. And so there's a whole spectrum of reasons, a lack of self-worth, a belief that this is all there is, a belief in negative karma, that I deserve this for some reason, shame that keeps those individuals silent or believing that this was their choice or their destiny. And so it is hard. However, when an individual comes to understand that their life has value, that they were created for a purpose, that they are meant to change the world, and they come to believe that is true, they move toward freedom. They naturally move toward freedom. And when they do it on their own power, of their own volition, autonomously, then they stay free. And not only stay free, but move to tremendous levels of cultural impact.
Yeah, I've met a few. I've interviewed a few people who have been through the trafficking, and their stories are always just heartbreaking. But the people that I talk to are the ones who escaped this and have moved on and bettered their life. And they're always spreading their message and helping people and letting people know that you're not alone in this, because so many people are suffering in silence. So many never even talked about it, and it's brutal. Being able to speak about these things and let people know that this has happened, not because you're looking for sympathy, but because you need people to understand that this is so common, and it's absolutely disgusting to me, that people don't they don't even want to hear about it. Most people just would rather pretend like this is not a problem, and that's just heartbreaking, and really it angers me. I was kind of curious on, you're an international organization, and have you found that most governments kind of don't want to talk about this? And it seems, yeah.
Yes. The thing is, Tim, that trafficking does not happen in a vacuum. It is a very multifaceted, dynamic, and profitable industry. And it happens because at every level of political power and social infrastructure, there are individuals, some that are profiting from exploitation and some that are complicit in it. Yep. So they are happy. And when they're complicit in it, often that is profitable as well. If you have somebody who is a border agent, and those who are exploiting people always know, we go to this border agent, and this individual is going to turn their face away and not acknowledge what's happening in their lane. That guy's getting kickbacks.
Yep.
So it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And when we start asking questions and we start disrupting the cycles, then it interferes with people's profitability. And that happens on an individual person to person level, and it happens on a much greater governmental level.
Yeah, that's what
Many,
I was gonna
yeah,
mention. Like most people don't talk about, Jeffrey Epstein, for example. I mean, that is all over the place, and he's the only guy who, who's human trafficked all these people to nobody. Nobody's
right.
been brought to justice for this. What is going on there? And the government won't talk about it. And, Ghislaine Maxwell, his partner, is in prison and convicted of child trafficking to nobody. It's like, because this is a huge problem that goes up and up and up the ladder into these governments. And I don't know if I'm running a risk by even saying that, on my own accord, but
Yeah, it is an interesting thing because exploitation or trafficking is always an exploitation of vulnerability.
mhm,
And so the individual being trafficked is being trafficked because of a core vulnerability. It might be education, it might be equality, it might be economics, but there is a core vulnerability that a trafficker steps in to meet. The power dynamic, though, is any individual who has the motivation and capacity to carry it out. And that range is, there are the wealthy
yeah.
that are exploiting people on a grand scale. But I've worked all over the world. So far, my husband and I have traveled and worked in 39 countries. And some of the red light districts we work in, it is immigrant construction workers that are the buyers, that are the perpetrators in the red light district. And these are guys that are earning, $3 a day, and they go spend $1 of it in a brothel.
Yeah.
And so there are like the Jeffrey Epsteins and, all the names on the list that we don't need to say out loud because anybody that wants to can do a Google search.
Yeah.
But I just want to bring to light that it's uncles, it's neighbors, it's soccer coaches, it's Cub Scout leaders, it is construction workers, it is the highest echelon and wealthy people, and it's the normal average Joe. The typical sex buyer in the U.S. is a man in his mid 40s earning more than $100,000 a year with and more than 70% of them are married with more than one child. So these are family guys.
You just described me perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah. These are guys that, are in your community group that you see in the grocery store, that you hang out with at happy hour, that are in your churches. They are average, normal guys.
Yeah.
And that's what the average sex buyer looks like.
Man, I mean, we can keep talking about this and go down this. I don't know if you feel compelled to share your story or if you just want to talk about Compass 31 today. I'm sure, whatever you want to, however you want to get into it.
I'll give an overview of my story, and I love that you acknowledged that the individuals that you had on your program talking about human trafficking were not in it for pity. I'm allergic to pity. If you're in the counter trafficking world and you're engaging with individuals who have experienced it, who have lived it, these are some of the most fierce and resilient people on the planet. They are warriors in a very real sense, that bloody and bruised, they get up the next day and survive another day and do whatever it takes to stay alive. And so I will share just an overview of my story for context for your listeners, in case anybody in the future listening is experiencing trafficking and they want to reach out, they will know that there's some common ground.
Yep.
But I want to share it from that perspective, especially because at this point, Tim, I'm living happily ever after.
Yeah.
So let me begin my story with there is a happy ending. There's a happily ever after to this story. And that is, I am living a life of purpose and impact. I am deeply and well loved by a man I've been married to for more than 30 years now. And I get a front row seat to watching redemption unfold again and again and again. So that's the end of the story. But if we backtrack many years, my exploitation started at the age of 4. I grew up in the Midwest in the United States, what many would call the buckle of the Bible Belt. And my family life, my home life was in quite a bit of upheaval most of the time. That was because my dad was an alcoholic. My house was in chaos. They would regulate the house. And I genuinely believe my family, my daddy especially, was knowing his own weakness, trying to put me in a place that was more stable. He genuinely thought he was doing a good thing. And another shout out to my daddy. He was an alcoholic, but I believe now, with years of retrospect and a lot of inner healing work, that he was just a man of really profound empathy. He saw all the brokenness in the world and was acquainted with trauma himself. And the pain of that was such a tremendous burden that the only way he could navigate daily life was to numb himself to it, right? So even his addiction, while it was disruptive and it put me in a really dangerous situation, it was born of a profound compassion and empathy for the brokenness he saw in the world and was unable to navigate. So that's what created the groundwork, if you will. I was sent to my grandparents, and unfortunately, it wasn't a safe place. My grandfather was a wicked, bad guy. And so at the age of 4, he began selling me to other men for sex. And the first day it happened, he had taken me to the train yard where he worked. And all day long, I was this 4-year-old little pixie with blonde pigtails bouncing all over the train yard, being spoiled rotten by all the guys working there. You know, I was the only kid on site, and there was candy and treats and laughter and teasing. And I spent most of the day with one man in particular, whose job it was to move train cars back and forth around the train yard. I got to sit on his lap. I got to drive the trains. I got to blow whistles. It was It was magical for a little kid. But late afternoon, when it was time to leave, I had no frame of reference for anything other. I assumed we were going back home. Instead, my grandfather took me to an open field where that man was waiting. Money exchanged hands, and then he came to take from me what he had paid for. And in a matter of minutes, my world turned upside down and inside out. You know, was wrecked physically, emotionally, spiritually. And after the unthinkable had happened, my grandfather wrapped me in a blanket, put me in the back seat of the car to take me home again. And one of the reasons I'm telling this story to your audience is because we tend to think of trafficking as some out there, over there, third world country sort of thing. You know, what happens in Thailand stays in Thailand sort of thing. And that does happen. But we also tend to think of it in Hollywood stereotypes. You know, we have some really fun movies where Liam Neeson or Jim Caviezel kicks down the door and brings justice and saves the babies, and that's great. Except it's a Hollywood drama of not really what happens to the vast majority of individuals being exploited. The vast majority, like myself, are originally trafficked by a family member, somebody that you love and that you trust. And many of us who experience what is called familial trafficking, being trafficked by a family member, grow up at home. I went to school. I was a straight A student. I was the teacher's pet because school was my safe place. I had friends outside of trafficking. I had what appeared to be a normal life. And so my trafficking experience was deeply compartmentalized. And that is a very common survival strategy. So that's part of the reason that I share my story, is just to bring light to the fact of how trafficking is happening and much of what it looks like in the US. So my grandfather wrapped me in a blanket, put me in the back seat of the car to take me home. Besides his perverse love for little girls, my grandfather loved old gospel music. I know,
Jesus.
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But he was a leader in his church. He was an elder or deacon, depending on denomination, what he would be called. He was a leader in his church. And so he put in a cassette tape playing How Great Thou Art.
Oh my.
And over the years of my exploitation, he would actually play that song in particular on repeat, either during the violence or immediately after. And that was a way of programming me. You asked early on, why do you people stay? And I was programmed from the age 4 that there is no safety to be found, and there's certainly no safety in faith. Um, and it was profoundly effective in some ways for many years. Actually, that song is still deeply problematic for me.
I would imagine.
If I'm at church, the worship leader is a good friend, and she will call me the night before and say, "Hey, just so you know, it's on the playlist tomorrow. It's going to happen at this point," so that I can step out, because I have a visceral reaction to that song still to this day. But the amazing thing is, and I'm not going to like proselytize or go far down this journey, but after that first experience, bloody, broken in the backseat of the car, after this unthinkable violence had unfolded, as I remember that event, a tangible part of the memory is Jesus being in the backseat of the car holding me on his lap with such tenderness. And he didn't mind the tears. He didn't mind the snot. He didn't mind the blood, just with tenderness going, "I've got you, baby, and I'm not going to let you go." And that is my life story. In kindergarten, I was praying every night that God would just let me die. In second grade, I sat in a church on Sunday morning behind the man who paid to rape me the night before. At 15, I underwent a forced abortion in a slaughterhouse, followed by a gang rape. And at age 17, I believed that my only hope of escape would be through completing my own suicide. And at that point, God again intervened so that my attempt failed. Best failure ever. I don't know if you've ever recounted your failures, but this is best failure ever. Tried and failed. If people are tempted to think that I'm brave or strong, no, I was desperate for an escape route and couldn't even do that effectively. So I would credit my resilience and my strength to a force much greater than myself, whether people call that divine love. I call that God.
I know there,
Um,
I know there's going to be people watching this and they're going to say, "Oh, well, if God was love and God was this and that, he wouldn't even let that stuff happen to you." But I would say to those people that this is so pervasive in the world that for it to happen to somebody like you, you're bringing light to this. And so,
Mm.
it is something that happened to you, but you're using that story to change the world and change lives and help, even if you're helping one poor kid that's dealing with this right now, you know, God has a plan. We don't
Yeah,
understand it.
absolutely. I think all of humanity, whether people profess to be atheist or agnostic or people of faith and whatever faith tradition, all of humanity wrestles at some point deeply with if there's a God, is God good? Is God trustworthy? Is God sovereign? Is God loving? And I think that's the normal human tradition. And if you're a Christ follower, there's even many times during the life of Jesus that people go, don't you care that we're perishing? A boat on a stormy sea, or Martha, Mary's not helping me in the kitchen. Don't you care? I'm doing all this work. Don't you care? I think that is a normal human reaction. And also what I personally have come to believe, and again, I'm not going to be preachy, but what has been transformational in my life is the understanding that, well, my belief is God is good and God is loving. And the proof of that is that he joins us in our suffering. He was there for me in the backseat of the car at 4 years old. And he was there for me when I was strapped to a wooden table in a slaughterhouse, going through the unthinkable. Jesus showed up in the darkest dark, and he kept showing up, and he kept me alive. And the core essence of who I am, even though my body was shattered in tremendous ways, and I still have ongoing physical ramifications from that. For example, I've been pregnant 17 times and had 14 losses, 3 live children, and 14 born into glory. I have a huge party waiting for me in heaven someday because I have a tremendous amount of scar tissue in my pelvis, and pregnancy is very difficult for me. Um, so even though I have wrestled with that question as well, what settled and brought transformation and healing to my heart was the fact that while God did not prevent the suffering in a way that I think is appropriate, and I was mad at God for a long time about that, the proof of his goodness and the proof of his love is that he never left me alone in it for a second. He kept showing up and kept showing up and kept showing up. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I get a front row seat to happily ever after. I do day in and day out. I'm working with individual survivors. I'm personally mentoring 18 survivors right now. And I'm, up to my neck in their stories, and their stories in many ways mirror mine and trigger my own emotional response. At the same time, I get to see the most fierce, resilient drive of humanity to not only survive, but to heal and to move forward with purpose and impact. So that's given me some really interesting ideas and beliefs about what post traumatic stress is and isn't, and whether it's a life sentence or not. I wonder if we might have some correlations because of so much work that you do with veterans. Thank you by the way, for your service and your work with those that have fought on behalf of creating a more just world.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my story is, I definitely did not experience anything traumatic. I think that's the absolute worst trauma somebody can experience is what you went through, and then war and other stuff. But um, yeah, I mean, I'm just out here trying to spread the message and let people know that yeah, there's a lot of trauma in this world, but there is hope and there is healing and there are services and people that can help you get through these horrific times that maybe you've experienced. But at the end of the day, I always believe, I've come to believe that these are just things that have happened to you. They aren't who you are. They don't have to define the rest of your life. You can use those stories to help other people and to to share and be a light and say, look, if I made it through this, you can too. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do on this program. I started it just I've always wanted to do be on the radio, I guess. But
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, hearing from all these survivors gives me hope that for all the people listening, like there is hope, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, there absolutely is hope. There is another side. There is light in the darkness. And I love having the opportunity to bring light to the issue. I navigated much of my childhood. I learned that my survival depended on my silence and my submission. So every time I have the opportunity to share a platform like this and use my voice to raise awareness about not only the realities of what's happened, but the potential for life after. You were preaching to the choir over here because I say all the time that trauma does not define us, it equips us. And that's why I refer to the individuals in our program not as victims. And I sometimes use the word survivor, but rarely I usually talk about individuals, humans, men, women, and children, individuals who have experienced trafficking.
Yeah.
There's somebody who has undergone an experience and sometimes, for many, many years, but it's an experience that has happened to them. It is not who that they are.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and that's what we repetitively over and over and over ad nauseum speak into those individuals that we serve, that this doesn't define you, it equips you. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to change the world? And the fact that I'm out here, my grandfather's long since dead, he's worm food a long time ago. And I'm out here living my best life. I sometimes, Tim, actually on a regular basis, I wake up in the morning and my face is tired from smiling so much in my sleep. Like, who does that?
Yeah.
Everybody has been to a party or an event that you laughed until you cried or that you smiled until your face hurts. But I wake up like that on a regular basis in the midst of some of the darkest work on the planet. And so I think that's further evidence that there is hope, there is healing, there is potential, there is transformation
Absolutely.
at our fingertips.
So one thing I just want to touch on because this is so prevalent and it is the people you don't expect. I worked as a reserve sheriff's deputy and did a couple of task force with like the U.S. Marshals, and we would go out and do sex offender sweeps. And we would, these people, there's hundreds and thousands of people just in one community that are registered sex offenders. And some of these people, they date back to the 80s, 90s, whatever, but we would go, they didn't check in. So we knock on their door. And some of these people, their family doesn't even know about it. Had never even knew they were a registered sex offender, and it's grandpa, or it's you're married to this lady forever, and we're knocking on the door, and the wife is confused. She's like, "Wait, what?" She had no idea. So just be very, very cautious about who you let your children be around. That is, it is, it's the people you don't expect. Like, and that's
It,
just what I want
yeah,
to hammer home.
it absolutely is. That's why, I was putting an emphasis on, it's the Cub Scout leader, it's the guy in your church, it's the average guy earning $100,000 a year with a wife and two kids.
Yeah.
It's the dentist. It's the teacher. They are people in the community that either have power or trust,
Yeah.
or some combination thereof. They're influential. They're leaders. They're pastors. Unfortunately, and they're law enforcement officers. It crosses every spectrum
Do you think,
because we
do you
all
think
have a
I'm
desire to
sorry.
connect.
I'm
Go
sorry
ahead.
about that.
Sorry.
Do you think most of these people have experienced abuse themselves, and so it's a repetitive behavior, or are these first time just pieces of crap? Sorry to.
I think, well, I'll just give you Jenny Sue's perspective. Okay.
Hmm.
So the
Yeah.
people can take it or leave it. My idea is that the individuals that perpetrate these crimes, and again, I'm gonna refer to them as individuals, not as criminals, but as individuals. That all humans are made for relationship. We're made to connect with other people. All humans are drawn to beauty. We're drawn to innocence. We're drawn to joy. And when we don't experience that in legitimate ways, because of our work, because of our culture, because of our mindset, because of trauma that's happened to us in our culture, there's, a very strong trend of what I would call cultural emasculation, where men are afraid to be men. They can't open doors. They can't say ma'am. They can't. They get accused of manspreading or mansplaining for just the way that they navigate with their body throughout the world. Um, and if men are stripped of their masculinity and they don't have viable ways to gain connection, whether that is because they've experienced violence themselves, because they have symptoms of post traumatic stress, for whatever reason it's happened, if they are not living their purpose and their identity in an impactful way, then they strive to get power in illicit ways. They strive to get connection in illicit ways, whether it's through, grooming and inappropriate relationships, or it's actually paying for sex, or through acts of violence like carrying out sexual assault and rape and domestic violence and child abuse. So I would say that at our core, all humans are driven to connect. We're driven to build relationships that are deeply intimate. You walk through any grocery store and, old men, little kids all delight in a baby. If a baby's laughing, everybody turns to look. We're drawn to innocence. We're drawn to joy. If we don't have that in tangible, healthy ways, then it's a very easy, slippery slope to go after it in illicit and dangerous and even violent ways.
Yeah. As a father, I have a 5 and a 3-year-old, and walking through the grocery store with my beautiful children, because they're beautiful, they take after their mom. They like, but people come up to them, and they're like, "Oh, you're such a cute little kid," and I'm just like, "Get away from my kid! Like, I don't know you." Like, it just my trigger warning, like
Yeah,
my antennas go up anytime,
yeah,
because I don't know that. To me, that just screams like something's off here, and maybe it's not, maybe it's innocent, but I'm a protective dad. So,
yeah. I think it's brilliant and beautiful that you're a protective dad and to have the discernment of knowing, people in the grocery store, even if it is an individual that's a perpetrator, nobody's walking off with your babies in the grocery store,
no,
right?
yeah.
And so the fact that you have the wisdom and discernment to weigh and measure every interaction is a beautiful thing and something that I wish that more people were in tune to, because
Yeah.
we tend to think that those that perpetrate this kind of violence are monsters that hide in the dark, and
Mhm.
they're not. They're walking among us, as are the survivors, the individuals who are experiencing trafficking. They're not hiding in the dark. They're not chained in a basement somewhere. The majority of them, they're out, they're in the grocery store, they're at your kids' birthday parties, they are in your kids' schools, they are in your small groups, they're all around us.
I recently had an experience with somebody extremely close to me that um, confided in me. This is a man in his 40s and confided in me because I did all this healing stuff with I used ayahuasca, and that's a whole nother
Mhm.
subject, but he saw this profound change in me. So he talked to me and confided in me that he is a survivor of sexual abuse from the time, he was very, very young, 4 or 5 years old till I don't know when, very later on in his life. And he never
Yeah.
told anybody, and just kept that in, and it just ate at him. And when I first met this person, I was like, man, I don't like this guy's vibe. He's Mr. Macho Man. I don't like, whatever
Hmm.
come to find out, it was just a big charade. This guy has had
Right.
nothing but abuse in his life, but he was afraid to tell anybody because he didn't, the cycle of abuse. He didn't want to be pegged as one of these people that, oh, well, if it happened to you, then you're going to do it to somebody else. So, you know, he's afraid to tell, but eventually, he went to this place and did the same thing I did, and found incredible healing, and is now sharing his story and uh, helping other people and other men. And just by me kind of talking about that, I've had more people come to me that I would have never, you know,
Mm.
police officers I've worked with,
Yeah.
come to me and say, yeah, that happened to me. I've never told anybody. And so
Thank you
there's,
so much. Thank you so much for being willing to enter the space and creating a safe environment for individuals to be able to disclose what's happened. That is such an incredible gift of healing that our world really needs more of,
it does.
especially for male
Yeah.
survivors, individuals that have experienced sexual violence. It assaults and undermines masculinity in a different way than it
Mhm.
impacts. Not more, not less, but just in a very unique way.
Yeah.
And I like that you brought up, you asked a question and then you alluded to it again of, or do these individuals that perpetrate the violence, is it because or they have experienced it? And there's a really interesting statistic, and I don't know where the study is right now, so I'm going to just generalize the numbers. But if data collected on convicted violent sex offenders, so that subset, not necessarily your average buyer in the red light district, but convicted violent sex offenders, the vast majority, well over 90%, experienced sexual violence or sexual abuse in their childhood. So that is true that they did. However, if you look at the broader culture and the number of individuals who have experienced sexual violence, male and female, during their childhood, it's something like less than 3% become perpetrators.
Wow.
So it depends on which way you look at the statistic.
Yeah.
If you've got 100 people that experience sexual violence, 3 of them go on to perpetuate it. But if of those 3%, if you look at violent sex offenders, 90 some odd percent
Yeah.
have experienced sexual violence.
I mean,
So both can be true
yeah, but
at the
that gives
same
me
time.
hope because these people who have experienced this, they don't want to have that stigma, and that's the
Right.
side of the numbers they don't talk about is these people actually don't generally become
Yeah. It's very,
perpetrators.
very rare,
Mhm.
actually, to go on and be a pathological perpetrator of
Well,
violence.
thank you for sharing that. Like that's a very important information that is I've never heard, and so
Yeah.
man, what am I missing? I know we could talk about this all day long, and but people need help. People are looking for healing. You are providing an outlet for that, or service for that. You know, what am I missing?
I don't think you've missed anything. I think we've had a beautiful conversation. I would like to add, just because of the broad spectrum of your audience, um, just my personal thought, my experience with post traumatic stress and the individuals I serve. And in many environments, we have pathologized these symptoms. Somebody gets triggered for no apparent reason. For me, I could be in the grocery store, some guy walks by wearing my grandfather's cologne.
Yeah.
Immediately, my body triggers and I'm in high alert. I might be sweating, I might be shaking, or, the response to how great thou art. I literally if I hear it unaware, I might vomit in response. And we tend to think that that is evidence of something that is broken. And so I would love to just momentarily reframe that based on experience and the individuals I serve, that actually our body is designed to heal, right? If your 5-year-old falls down and skins their knee, they don't have to sit on the curb and cry and meditate and send platelets to their skin knee for it to form a scab, or think white blood cells, white blood cells, white blood cells for their body to fight an infection. The body heals. And in the healing process, it might be achy, it might be uncomfortable, it might be itchy. They might pick at it. If they pick at it, it festers, right? But the body still heals because we're made to heal. I think those symptoms of post-traumatic stress, which are terribly uncomfortable, and from the outside looking in, seem unreasonable, are actually evidence that our body is healing, that our mental health is designed to heal exactly like our physical health is. So when something happens, like me getting triggered at the grocery store, physical response, my brain releases chemicals. It prepares me to fight or flight. This is evidence that I have everything in me needed to rise and meet or escape this challenge, this life-threatening event. Again and again and again. That guy walks by, I have this flush, this immediate reaction. That's not proof of brokenness. That's proof that my body is working exactly as it's designed to, and that I can honor the strength of what was woven through my childhood that brought me to this place. Guess what? I won. He didn't win. I'm still here and having impact. So I would just like to highlight for any individuals that you serve that experience post-traumatic stress, just to invite them to consider that that is evidence that they have survived every unthinkable event that they've been through, that their body was equipped to keep them alive. Proof and point, here they are. And that those moments of trauma should be honored and acknowledged and held with tenderness. And so I would just like to encourage that's why I refer to post-traumatic stress, but not PTSD or it as a disorder, because I think it's evidence of healing and resilience. And while it's uncomfortable, the more we can understand it as our body's appropriate and healthy reaction, the less problematic the symptoms get and the quicker they resolve.
Thank you much. I appreciate you taking the time to share your story and your journey and how you're helping people. If people want to get a hold of you or go to your website, what's the best way to get a hold of you for those listening? Because I will tag you and everything.
Absolutely. They can find my organization, compass31.org, anywhere. We have Facebook, Instagram, Jennisue Jessen. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the places. Come find me. If they want to have a conversation, I do that all the time to equip them to understand trafficking or empowering them on their own healing journey. So come find me, Jennisue Jessen.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. And if you found value in this conversation, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. So thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.